My name is Sarah Martinez. I'm 32 years old, and until 3 months ago, I thought I was living the American dream. I had built eco-clean solutions from a single chemical formula in my garage into an $85 million company that revolutionized how America thinks about sustainable cleaning products. I had a beautiful home overlooking Lake Austin, a husband I adored, and what I believed was a partnership that would last forever. Then one ordinary Tuesday morning, while Kevin was in the shower, I picked up our shared iPad to check the weather, and my entire world collapsed. The screen was open to his email, displaying a message from Robert Sterling, a divorce attorney I'd never heard of. The subject line read, "Timeline for asset claims, Thompson vs. Martinez dissolution strategy." My hands started trembling as I read the first line. Kevin, as discussed, the optimal timing for filing would be immediately following the Henderson Industries contract signing, as this will maximize your claim to the company's increased valuation. What followed were detailed calculations of my assets, spreadsheets breaking down every aspect of my business, and a timeline showing Kevin had been planning to leave me for 8 months. 8 months of kisses goodbye, 8 months of I love you whispered in the dark, 8 months of discussing our future together, all while he was systematically planning to take half of everything I had built with my own hands. The most devastating part came in the final paragraph. The Martinez woman believes she's built something together with you, but Texas community property law will ensure you receive your fair share of her hard work. Timing is everything, and patience will be worth approximately $40 million. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Looking back now, I can see how foolishly optimistic I was about everything in my life. I genuinely believed that love conquered all, that hard work always paid off, and that the person sleeping next to me every night shared my dreams for our future together. The truth is, I was so consumed with building my company and creating a life I thought we both wanted that I missed every single warning sign that Kevin was already planning his exit strategy. Let me tell you how I built EcoClean Solutions, because understanding what I created is crucial to grasping exactly what Kevin tried to steal from me. 9 years ago, I was working as a chemical engineer for a large manufacturing company in San Antonio, developing industrial cleaning solutions that were effective but environmentally devastating. Night after night, I came home feeling sick about the chemicals we were pumping into the world. Knowing there had to be a better way, I started experimenting in my garage, working with plant-based compounds and biodegradable formulation. My neighbors probably thought I was crazy, seeing me out there at midnight mixing solutions in old paint buckets. But I was obsessed with cracking the code for cleaning products that could match industrial strength without destroying the environment. After 18 months of failed experiments, contaminated batches, and formulas that either didn't work or smelled like rotten eggs, I finally created something revolutionary. The breakthrough came when I combined enzyme technology with naturally occurring surfactants in a way no one had attempted before. The result was a cleaning concentrate that outperformed traditional chemicals while being completely biodegradable. I tested it on everything: grease stains that had been set for years, industrial equipment, even the nastiest bathroom situations you can imagine. It worked better than anything on the market. Starting the company was terrifying. I quit my stable job, cashed out my retirement savings, and moved into a tiny apartment so I could afford to rent a small production facility. Those first 2 years were the hardest of my life. I was working 20-hour days, mixing batches by hand, driving all over Texas to pitch my products to anyone who would listen. Most nights, I survived. Eco-friendly doesn't work for serious cleaning, they'd tell me. If it's natural, it can't be as effective as chemicals. I heard every excuse in the book, but I knew what I had created was game-changing. I just needed someone to give me a chance to prove it. My first real break came when I convinced the owner of a small restaurant chain to try my degreasing formula in their kitchens. Within a week, he was calling me back, amazed at how well it worked and how much better his kitchen staff felt without breathing harsh chemical fumes all day. He placed an order for all 15 of his locations, and suddenly I had my first real customer. Word spread through the restaurant industry faster than I had expected. Kitchen managers started calling me directly asking for the miracle cleaner that doesn't make people sick. Within 6 months, I had contracts with over 50 restaurants across Texas. I hired my first employee, Jennifer Walsh, who became my CFO and closest business partner. Jennifer believed in the vision from day one and helped me scale production while maintaining quality. By year 3, we had expanded beyond restaurants into office buildings, hotels, and manufacturing facilities. The environmental movement was gaining momentum, and businesses were finally ready to invest in sustainable solutions that actually were. We moved into a real facility in Austin, hired 12 employees, and started developing new product lines. The growth was explosive but controlled. Year 4 brought our first major breakthrough when a national retail chain agreed to carry our consumer product. Suddenly, EcoClean Solutions was on shelves across the country. competing directly with brands that had dominated the market for decades. The difference was that our products worked better, cost less to manufacture, and didn't fill homes with toxic fumes. By year 6, we were generating over $30 million in annual revenue. I had built something from nothing, creating jobs for nearly 100 people, and proving that sustainable business practices could be more profitable than traditional method. The industry was taking notice, and I was being invited to speak at environmental conferences and business summits across the country. That's where I met Kevin. He was attending an environmental sustainability conference in Denver representing his advertising agency's new green marketing division. I was giving a keynote speech about building profitable sustainable businesses, and afterwards, he approached me at the networking reception. He was tall, charming, and seemed genuinely fascinated by what I had accomplished. "I've never met someone who's actually changed an entire industry," he said, offering to buy me a drink. "Most people talk about making a difference, but you've actually done it." His smile was warm and genuine, and unlike many men I'd met in business, he seemed more interested in my work than my appearance or bank account. We talked for hours that night about environmental responsibility, business ethics, and our shared belief that companies had an obligation to create positive change in the world. Kevin told me about his work helping businesses develop authentic sustainability messaging, and his passion for the cause seemed as genuine as mine. When the conference ended, we exchanged numbers and began what felt like the most natural long-distance relationship of my life. Kevin would call me every evening to hear about my day, asking detailed questions about product development, manufacturing challenges, and expansion plan. He listened like someone who truly cared about my success, offering insights from his marketing background that actually helped me think about my business differently. 3 months into our relationship, he started flying to Austin every other weekend to spend time with me. What impressed me most about Kevin was how he fit into my world without trying to dominate it. He'd visit the production facility and spend hours talking with my employees, learning about their work and showing genuine interest in their contributions to the company. Jennifer liked him immediately, which meant a lot to me since she was protective of both me and the business we'd built together. Kevin's background in marketing proved valuable as we prepared for major expansion. He helped me refine our brand messaging, develop more effective advertising strategies, and present our story in ways that resonated with both consumers and investors. His agency wasn't large enough to handle our account, but he provided consultation that helped us choose the right marketing firm and develop campaigns that tripled our consumer sales within a year. After 11 months of long-distance dating, Kevin proposed during a weekend trip to Big Bend National Park. We were watching the sunset over the desert and he told me he couldn't imagine building a life with anyone else. "You're the most incredible woman I've ever met," he said as he got down on one knee. "You've shown me what it means to have a vision and the courage to make it real." The proposal felt perfect, not just because of the romantic setting, but because Kevin had proven himself to be someone who supported my ambitions rather than feeling threatened by them. Too many men I dated seemed intimidated by my success or expected me to prioritize their careers over mine. Kevin celebrated my achievements and seemed genuinely excited about building a future together. We married 6 months later in a small ceremony at our Lake Austin home, surrounded by family, friends, and many of my employees, who had become like family over the years. Kevin moved to Austin permanently, taking a position as marketing director with a respected advertising agency that specialized in environmental and health-conscious brand. His salary was solid at around $120,000 a year, comfortable but a fraction of what EcoClean was generating. The income disparity never seemed to bother Kevin, at least not open. He would joke about being married to a captain of industry, and seemed proud when business magazines featured me in articles about successful female entrepreneur. When we bought our dream home in Lakeway, an architectural masterpiece with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake, Kevin insisted we celebrate by hosting a party for everyone who had supported my journey. Those early years of marriage felt like a continuation of our cork. Kevin was supportive, encouraging, and genuinely seemed to enjoy being part of the EcoClean family. He'd attend company events, get to know my employees' families, and offer marketing insights that helped us continue grow. Jennifer often commented on how lucky I was to find someone who enhanced my life without trying to control it. We decided not to have children immediately, agreeing that we wanted to focus on establishing our careers and enjoying our time together as a couple. Kevin was particularly adamant about waiting, saying he wanted to be able to provide the kind of stable, affluent childhood he'd never had. "Let's build our empire first," he'd say. "Then we can focus on building our family." The company continued thriving throughout our early marriage. We expanded into industrial applications, developed partnerships with major corporations, and began licensing our technology to manufacturers in other countries. By our 4th year of marriage, EcoClean Solutions was valued at over $60 million and employed nearly 200 people across 3 facilities. Kevin's spending habits evolved along with our increasing wealth. He started gravitating toward luxury items, expensive watches, designer clothes, the newest BMW models. We've earned the right to enjoy our success, he'd say when I occasionally questioned a particularly expensive perch. Since the business was generating more than enough to support an affluent lifestyle, I rarely objected. I wanted him to feel like a full partner in our prosperity. Looking back, I can see warning signs that I rationalized away at the time. Kevin became increasingly interested in the financial details of my business, asking questions about company valuations, intellectual property rights, and profit distribution. He suggested I should involve him more in major business decisions, arguing that his marketing background gave him valuable perspective on strategic planning. He also began making subtle comments about my work habits and business relationship. If I worked late on an important project, he'd mention feeling neglected. When I traveled for business conferences, he'd express concern about me being away so much. If Jennifer and I spent long hours planning new product launches, Kevin would joke about feeling like a business widow. These comments felt like normal relationship dynamics at the time, the kind of adjustments any couple makes when building a life together. Kevin never directly preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Besides my work or demanded I change my priorities, but he had a way of making me feel guilty about the time and energy my business required. I started declining some speaking engagements and limiting business travel to make sure he felt prioritized. My best friend Rachel Chen, who had known me since college, began expressing concerns about these changes in my behavior. "You're apologizing for being successful," she told me during one of our monthly coffee meetings. The Sarah I know would never turn down opportunities because someone else feels insecure. I defended Kevin, explaining that marriage required compromise and that I needed to be sensitive to his feelings. "He's been incredibly supportive of my career," I insist. "The least I can do is make sure he feels valued too." Rachel wasn't convinced. "Supporting your career and controlling your career are two different things," she said. "Just make sure you're not losing yourself in the process of keeping him happy." But I was confident in my marriage and my ability to balance my professional ambitions with my personal relationships. Kevin and I seemed to communicate well about most issues, and he continued to celebrate my successes publicly. When EcoClean won a major environmental innovation award, Kevin was beaming with pride in the audience. When I was featured on the cover of Entrepreneur magazine, he framed the issue and hung it in our home office. The biggest transformation in our relationship came 18 months ago when EcoClean developed a revolutionary new formula for biodegradable packaging material. This innovation had the potential to disrupt the entire packaging industry, and we were suddenly fielding calls from major corporations interested in licensing agreements and potential acquisition. Henderson Industries, one of the largest consumer goods manufacturers in the country, approached us about a comprehensive partnership that would involve licensing our technology, co-developing new products, and potentially acquiring a significant stake in our company. The deal represented the kind of breakthrough that could triple our valuation and establish EcoClean as a major player in the sustainable manufacturing space. Kevin seemed more excited about this opportunity than I'd seen him about anything in years. He spent hours researching Henderson Industries, analyzing their market position, and suggesting negotiation strategies. "This could be the deal that changes everything for us," he kept saying. "We're talking about generational wealth here." His enthusiasm felt genuine and supportive, so I welcomed his input on the negotiations. Kevin had a good understanding of corporate partnerships from his marketing work, and his insights about positioning our company advantageously were valuable. He even took vacation time to accompany me to several meetings in Henderson's headquarters in Dallas. What I didn't realize at the time was that Kevin's excitement wasn't about our shared future success. He was calculating his potential payout from a divorce settlement that would give him access to half of whatever value this deal created. Every strategic suggestion, every piece of negotiation advice, every expression of support was part of a plan to maximize how much of my life's work he could claim as his own. The Henderson negotiations stretched over several months, with lawyers, accountants, and industry experts analyzing every aspect of the proposed partnership. The complexity of the deal required me to travel frequently, often for multi-day meetings that involved technical presentations and detailed financial planning. Kevin always seemed understanding about these demands on my time, even encouraging me to focus completely on securing the best possible terms. During this period, Kevin began working more closely with Lisa Rodriguez, a colleague at his advertising agency who specialized in corporate communication. He explained that Lisa was helping him develop expertise in partnership messaging that could benefit both his agency and my negotiations with Henderson. They started working late together regularly, often meeting on weekends to develop presentation materials and communication strategy. I thought it was wonderful that Kevin was advancing his own career while supporting mine. Lisa seemed professional and competent the few times I met her, and Kevin spoke about their collaboration in purely business terms. When I occasionally felt a twinge of concern about the amount of time they were spending together, I reminded myself that I was often working similar hours with Jennifer and other business partners. Rachel continued expressing reservations about changes she noticed in my personality and priori are second-guessing yourself more, she observed during one of our conversations. You used to make decisions quickly and confidently. Now you seem to seek approval for everything. I thought she was being overly analytical. I'm just being more collaborative, I explained. Marriage means considering your partner's perspective on major decisions. But Rachel was right that something had shifted in my confidence and decision-making process. I had started running business strategies past Kevin before presenting them to my board of directors. I asked his opinion on personnel decisions, product development priorities, and marketing initiatives. Kevin's input was often helpful, but I was becoming dependent on his approval in ways that felt different from healthy collaboration. The most significant warning sign came when Kevin suggested I should add his name to several of my personal bank accounts and investment portfolios. We're married, he reasoned. We should have complete financial transparency and shared access to everything. He argued that adding him to my accounts would simplify our household financial management and demonstrate my trust in our partnership. Against Jennifer's advice and my own initial instincts, I added Kevin's name to most of my personal account. I told myself this was what committed married couples did, that financial secrecy would be more damaging to our relationship than shared access. Kevin seemed appreciative of my trust, often mentioning how much it meant to him that I considered him a full partner in every aspect of our life together. That decision would later prove to be one of the most dangerous mistakes I made during our. Kevin now had legal access to most of my personal wealth and detailed knowledge of my financial situation. He could monitor my spending, track my investments, and plan his divorce strategy with complete information about my asset. The final red flag that I somehow managed to ignore came just 3 months before I discovered his divorce plans. Kevin started asking detailed questions about EcoClean's intellectual property rights, patent protections, and licensing agreement. He claimed this information would help him better understand our company's value in his discussions with potential marketing partners. I provided him with comprehensive information about our patent portfolio, trademark registrations, and licensing deal. Kevin studied these documents carefully, asking follow-up questions about revenue projections, royalty structures, and ownership details. I was impressed by his growing sophistication about intellectual property law and business valuation. What I didn't realize was that Kevin was sharing all of this information with Robert Sterling, the divorce attorney who was helping him calculate exactly how much of my company he could claim in a divorce settlement. Every patent I explained, every licensing deal I described, every valuation report I shared was being analyzed for its potential contribution to Kevin's financial claim against me. The morning I discovered Kevin's divorce plan started like any other day in our. He kissed me goodbye, told me he loved me, and left for what he said was an early meeting with an important client. I was planning to work from home that morning, catching up on industry research and preparing for a conference call with Henderson Industries scheduled for that afternoon. Kevin had forgotten our shared iPad on the kitchen counter, which was unusual since he typically took it everywhere for reading during his commute. I picked it up to check the weather and maybe review some news headlines before diving into work. The device was still logged into Kevin's email account, and the screen displayed a message from Robert Sterling that changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage and my future. The message thread revealed months of correspondence between Kevin and his attorney, dating back to when Henderson Industries first approached us about the partnership deal. As I scrolled through email after email, a sickening picture emerged of calculated deception that went far deeper than I had imagined. Kevin hadn't just decided to leave me. He had been strategically planning his exit from the moment my company's value started climbing toward astronomical figure. The emails contained detailed financial projections showing how much Kevin could claim under Texas community property law. Robert Sterling had prepared comprehensive analyses of my company's intellectual property, calculating potential royalty values and licensing revenues that Kevin could argue he deserved as my spouse. They had spreadsheets breaking down every asset we owned together, from our Lake Austin home to investment accounts I had built over years of careful financial plan. What made my stomach turn were the casual references to me as the target in discussions about optimal timing to maximize extraction value. One email from Kevin to Sterling read, "Sarah is completely focused on the Henderson deal right now. She trusts me completely and shares everything about the company's financial projections. The latest valuation estimates put the company at $90 million after the Henderson partnership closes. If we time this correctly, I could be looking at $45 million in community property claim." Sterling's response was equally calculating. "Your wife's transparency is working in our favor. The documentation she's provided about patent values and licensing deals will be crucial for establishing your claim to intellectual property developed during the marriage. Remember, in Texas, anything created or improved during the marriage is community property, regardless of who did the actual work." I discovered emails where Kevin had been photographing confidential business documents when I wasn't home, sending pictures of patent filings, licensing agreements, and financial reports to his attorney. He had systematically documented every aspect of my business operations, creating a comprehensive case file that Sterling could use to claim Kevin deserved half of everything I had built. The betrayal went beyond just divorce plan. Kevin had been sharing detailed information about my business strategies with Lisa Rodriguez, not for legitimate marketing collaboration, but as part of an affair that had been going on for 8 months. Their email exchanges were filled with intimate messages mixed with discussions about how they would spend Sarah's money once the divorce was finalized. One particularly devastating message from Kevin to Lisa read, "Soon we won't have to hide anymore. Sterling thinks we can get at least $40 million from Sarah, maybe more if the Henderson deal goes through as projected. We could buy that house in Portland you love and never worry about money again. Just a few more months of playing the loving husband, and then we'll be free to build our real life together." Lisa's responses showed she was fully aware of Kevin's deception and actively participating in planning their future at my expense. "I can't wait to quit this job and focus on my $40 million will buy us a lot of freedom. Sarah has no idea what's coming, does she? You're such a good actor, baby. She still looks at you like you're her Prince Charming." The emails revealed that Kevin and Lisa had been meeting regularly during his supposed business trips to Dallas and other cities. They had taken romantic getaways to Portland, Seattle, and Denver, all charged to credit cards linked to my business account. Kevin had been using my money to finance his affair while planning to take half of my life's work in the divorce settlement. I found receipts and confirmations for expensive jewelry Kevin had bought Lisa, luxury hotel rooms they had shared, and romantic dinners at exclusive restaurants. The total amount he had spent on their affair using my accounts was over $30,000. Every purchase felt like another layer of betrayal, proof that Kevin had been actively stealing from me while pretending to love me. The most painful discovery came in an email where Kevin described his strategy for maintaining my trust until the optimal moment to file for divorce. "Sarah is so focused on business success that she doesn't pay attention to relationship red flag. As long as I keep praising her work and acting supportive, she'll never suspect what's coming. She's actually making this easier by adding my name to her accounts and sharing confidential business information. The woman thinks we're building a future together when I'm really just documenting everything I can claim in the settlement." I sat in our kitchen, surrounded by the life I thought we had built together, reading message after message that revealed how thoroughly Kevin had been manipulating. Every conversation about our future, every celebration of my business successes, every intimate moment we had shared was now as part of his elaborate deception. The man I had married was a stranger who saw me as nothing more than a source of wealth to be exploited. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the iPad. I felt physically sick rushing to our bathroom where I threw up until there was nothing left in my stomach. The emotional pain was unlike anything I had ever experienced, a combination of betrayal, humiliation, and rage that left me feeling completely hollow. I had given Kevin access to every aspect of my life and he had used that trust to systematically plan my destruction. After composing myself enough to think clearly, I realized I needed to document everything before Kevin returned home and potentially discovered that I had seen his email. I used my phone to photograph every message, forwarding the most damaging emails to my personal account using a secure method that wouldn't leave traces on the iPad. I created a detailed timeline of Kevin's deception, noting dates, amounts, and specific evidence of his affair and divorce plan. The hardest part was returning the iPad to exactly where Kevin had left it and preparing to act normal when he came home that evening. I spent the afternoon pacing around our house, looking at furniture we had chosen together, artwork we had bought during romantic trips, and photographs celebrating milestones in both my business and our marriage. Everything felt contaminated by the knowledge of Kevin's true intention. When Kevin walked through the door that evening, I had to summon every ounce of self-control to greet him with a smile and ask about his day. He talked enthusiastically about a new client presentation he was developing, never mentioning that he had spent part of the day coordinating divorce strategy with his attorney. He kissed me hello, told me he loved me, and suggested we order dinner from our favorite restaurant to celebrate my progress on the Henderson negotiation. Sitting across from Kevin at dinner watching him perform the role of loving husband while knowing he was planning to destroy my life was one of the most surreal experiences I have ever endured. He asked detailed questions about my conference call with Henderson Industries, appearing genuinely interested in how the negotiations were progressing. I realized he was gathering intelligence that he would share with his attorney to help calculate his potential claims against my business. That night, as Kevin slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling and trying to process the magnitude of his betrayal. This wasn't just about money or even infidelity. Kevin had systematically studied my vulnerabilities, exploited my trust, and turned my greatest professional achievements into weapons that he planned to use against me. He had made me complicit in my own potential destruction by encouraging me to share confidential business information that he was secretly documenting for his divorce case. The next morning, I waited until Kevin left for work before calling Rachel. My voice was barely a whisper as I told her what I had discovered. "He's been planning to divorce me for 8 months, I said, struggling to keep my composure. "He has detailed financial information about my company, evidence of every asset we own together, and a timeline for filing that's designed to maximize how much he can take from me." Rachel's response was immediate and fierce. "That bastard. How dare he manipulate you like this? Sarah, you need to protect yourself right now. Don't confront him until you have a plan, and don't let him know that you know. We need to get you the best divorce attorney in Texas immediately." I spent that day in a fog, trying to maintain normal business operations while my personal world was collapsing. During a meeting with Jennifer about new product development, I found myself staring out the window, wondering how I had been so blind to Kevin's true nature. Jennifer noticed my distraction and asked if everything was okay, but I couldn't bring myself to explain what was happening until I had developed a strategy for protecting my business. That afternoon, I began researching divorce attorneys in Austin, looking for someone with experience protecting high-net-worth individuals in complex property disputes. I needed someone who understood intellectual property law, business valuation, and asset protection strategy. Most importantly, I needed an attorney who could help me prepare for Kevin's attack before he realized I knew what was coming. Over the next several days, I lived a double life that felt like slow torch. During the day, I managed my business and prepared for what could be the most important deal in EcoClean's history. During the evening, I played the role of loving wife to a man who was actively plotting to steal half of everything I had worked to build. Kevin continued sharing affectionate moments, discussing our future plans, and offering business advice, all while secretly coordinating with his attorney and continuing his affair with Lisa. The emotional strain was overwhelmed. I lost my appetite and had trouble sleeping, surviving on coffee and adrenaline while trying to maintain the appearance of normalcy. I started wearing more makeup to hide the dark circles under my eyes and practiced smiling in the mirror before Kevin came home each evening. The performance was exhausting, but I knew that revealing my knowledge too early could give Kevin the opportunity to accelerate his timeline or hide assets I wasn't yet aware of. Rachel became my lifeline during this period, checking on me multiple times each day and helping me research attorneys and protection strategies. She offered to come stay with me, but I was afraid Kevin would notice unusual changes in my routine and become suspicious. Instead, we communicated through a secure messaging app that left no traces on my regular devices. 5 days after discovering Kevin's plans, I met with David Harrison, reportedly the most effective divorce attorney in Texas for high-asset cases. His office was located in a discreet building in West Austin, designed to provide privacy for clients who needed to protect their reputations and assets during contentious proceedings. David had represented numerous entrepreneurs, entertainers, and business leaders in complex divorce cases with a track record of protecting his clients' interests against predatory spouses. David listened without interruption as I explained everything I had discovered about Kevin's plan. I showed him the photographs I had taken of the email correspondence, the financial documents Kevin had compiled, and the evidence of his affair with Lisa. David's expression remained professionally neutral, but I could see him taking detailed notes and calculating the implications of Kevin's strategy. "Unfortunately, this type of calculated deception is more common than most people realize," David said when I finished my presentation. "Your husband has clearly been receiving sophisticated legal advice about how to maximize his claims against your asset. The timing of his planned filing, the documentation he's gathered, and the asset discovery he's conducted, all suggest a well-coordinated strategy to exploit Texas community property laws." My heart sank as David explained the challenges I faced under Texas law. Community property rules mean that assets acquired during marriage are generally split 50-50, regardless of who earned them or contributed more to their creation. Your husband's attorney is correct that he could potentially claim half of your company's increased value during your marriage, including intellectual property developed while you were married and business growth that occurred during that period. But David's tone became more encouraging as he continued. "However, there are legitimate strategies we can employ to protect your interests if we act quickly and carefully. The key is that everything we do must serve valid business purposes beyond just protecting your assets from divorce claim. We need to make strategic decisions that make sense for your company while also safeguarding your interests." David explained that successful asset protection required a multifaceted approach combining legal, financial, and business strategy. "We'll work with the best financial advisors and business consultants in Texas to develop a comprehensive plan that protects your company while remaining completely legal and defensible in court. The goal isn't to hide assets or engage in fraudulent transfers, but to restructure your holdings in ways that accurately reflect your contributions and protect your intellectual property." Over the next 2 hours, David outlined potential strategies for protecting my business and personal asset. We discussed creating new business entities to hold my intellectual property, restructuring licensing agreements to more accurately reflect value creation, and implementing corporate governance changes that would make it difficult to assign simple community property values to my business interests. David also recommended bringing in Michelle Foster, a financial advisor who specialized in asset protection for high-net-worth individuals facing divorce. The complexity of what we were planning was both encouraging and overwhelming. David and Michelle would need to coordinate with my existing business team, including Jennifer and our corporate attorneys, to develop strategies that serve legitimate business purposes while protecting my interest. The timeline was critical because Kevin could potentially file for divorce at any moment, especially once the Henderson Industries deal was finalized. David emphasized the importance of maintaining absolute secrecy about our planning. If your husband suspects that you know about his intentions, he could accelerate his timeline and file for divorce before we have adequate protections in play. You'll need to continue acting normally at home while we work to safeguard your interests. This will be emotionally challenging, but it's essential for protecting everything you've built. I left David's office feeling a mixture of hope and terror. Hope because I finally had experienced professionals helping me develop a strategy to protect my life's work. Because I realized the next several weeks would require me to maintain my performance as an unsuspecting wife while secretly preparing for legal and financial warfare with the man I had once loved and trusted complete. That evening, Kevin suggested we celebrate the progress on the Henderson deal by going to our favorite steakhouse overlooking Lake Austin. As we sat on the restaurant's deck, watching the sunset reflect off the water, Kevin raised his wineglass and toasted to our bright future together. I clinked my glass against his, knowing that he was thinking about a very different future than the one I was imagining. The Henderson deal is going to change everything for us, Kevin said, his eyes bright with what I now recognized as calculation rather than genuine excitement. We'll have the kind of financial security that most people only dream about. We could travel anywhere, buy anything we want, maybe finally start that family we've been discussing. I nodded and smiled, playing my part in his charade while mentally preparing for the battle that was coming. Yes. I agreed. Everything is definitely going to change. If only Kevin knew how right I was about that prediction and how differently those changes would affect him than he was planned. The next morning, I began implementing the first phases of the protection strategy David and Michelle had developed. The plan required careful coordination with Jennifer and our corporate legal team, bringing them partially into my confidence without revealing the full scope of Kevin's betrayal. I explained that I needed to restructure certain aspects of the company before the Henderson deal closed, ostensibly to protect our intellectual property and optimize our corporate structure for future growth. Jennifer was immediately supportive, though I could see questions in her eyes about the urgency of these changes. "Sarah, is everything okay?" she asked during a private meeting in my office. "These restructuring moves make sense strategically, but the timeline feels unusually compressed. Are there issues with the Henderson negotiations that I should know about?" I had to be careful about how much I revealed, even to Jennifer, because too many people knowing about Kevin's plans could create opportunities for information to leak back to him. "I've been thinking about asset protection and corporate governance issues that the Henderson deal has highlighted," I said, which was technically true. "I want to make sure our intellectual property is properly protected and that our corporate structure accurately reflects value creation and ownership contributions." Over the next week, we accelerated several business initiatives that had been in planning stages for months. We created new subsidiary companies to hold specific aspects of our intellectual property, restructured licensing agreements to more accurately reflect value creation, and implemented corporate governance changes that would make it extremely difficult to assign simple community property values to my business interests. Every decision was carefully documented with clear business rationales that predated my discovery of Kevin's plan. We had board meeting minutes discussing intellectual property protection, email chains about corporate restructuring needs, and strategic planning documents showing these moves were logical extensions of conversations we had been having for months. David insisted this documentation would be crucial if Kevin's attorney later tried to claim these changes were motivated primarily by divorce planning rather than legitimate business purposes. The most challenging aspect of implementing our protection strategy was maintaining normal behavior at home while coordinating complex legal and financial maneuvers during the day. Kevin was becoming more attentive to my schedule and activities, asking detailed questions about my meetings and business trip. I had to be extremely careful about phone calls and emails related to our planning conducting most of this business away from home or when I was certain Kevin wouldn't return unexpected. Michelle Foster proved invaluable in developing personal asset protection strategies that complemented the business restructuring David was coordinated. She helped me create trusts for specific assets, document the separate property nature of investments I had made before marriage, and establish clear paper trails showing which assets were mine independently versus which had been acquired during our marriage with Community Fund. The emotional toll of living this double life was enormous. Every morning I woke up next to Kevin. I had to remind myself not to let my knowledge of his betrayal show in my face or voice. Every evening when he came home and told me about his day, I wondered which parts were lies and which conversations he was having with Lisa Rodriguez that he wasn't mentioning. Every time he told me he loved me, I felt sick knowing that he was simultaneously planning to steal half of my life's work. Rachel continued to be my primary source of emotional support during this period, though even she was concerned about the strain I was under. "Sarah, you're losing weight and you look exhausted," she said during one of our coffee meetings. "I'm worried about how much longer you can maintain this level of stress without it affecting your health or your business performance." She was right that the situation was taking a physical toll. I was barely sleeping, had lost nearly 10 pounds in 2 weeks, and was surviving primarily on coffee and determination. But I was also aware that Kevin was watching for any changes in my behavior that might suggest I suspected his plan. I increased my exercise routine to explain any weight loss, started taking supplements to maintain my energy levels, and practiced meditation techniques to help manage the anxiety that was constantly churning in my stomach. The most dangerous moment came when Kevin almost caught me on a phone call with David Harrison. I was in our home office discussing the final details of a trust structure when I heard Kevin's car in the driveway 2 hours earlier than expected. I quickly ended the call, closed the documents on my computer, and switched to reviewing routine company emails just as Kevin walked into the room. "You're home early," I said, hoping my voice sounded casual rather than client meeting ended sooner than expected. Kevin replied, studying my face carefully. "Everything okay? You look a little flustered." I forced a smile and gestured toward my computer screen. "Just dealing with some frustrating vendor issues. Nothing that won't resolve itself." Kevin seemed to accept this explanation, but the close call made me realize I needed to be even more careful about when and where I conducted business related to protecting my assets. Protecting my assets? 2 weeks after beginning our protection strategy, most of the critical elements were in play. My intellectual property was now held by a complex network of subsidiary companies that I controlled, but that would be extremely difficult to value and divide in a community property settlement. My personal assets were protected through various trust structures and careful documentation of their separate property nature. Most importantly, everything we had done served legitimate business purposes that were well documented and predated my discovery of Kevin's divorce plan. David scheduled a final strategy meeting to review our preparations and discuss what would happen when Kevin eventually filed for divorce. "We've created significant obstacles to his strategy," David explained, "but we need to be prepared for an aggressive response when he realizes his expected settlement won't be as straightforward as he anticipated." As I sat in David's office, reviewing the comprehensive protection plan we had developed, I felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. Relief because I had taken decisive action to protect my life's work from Kevin's calculated attack. Anticipation because I knew that the real battle was about to begin, and Kevin had no idea that his carefully planned ambush was about to backfire spectacularly. The Henderson Industries contract signing was scheduled for the following Thursday, and I knew from Kevin's emails that he planned to file for divorce within days of that milestone. The irony wasn't lost on me that the biggest business achievement of my career would also mark the beginning of what Kevin expected to be his financial windfall. What he didn't know was that every day he delayed gave me more time to strengthen the protective barriers we had built around my ass. Kevin's behavior during this period became increasingly transparent now that I understood his true motivations. He was more affectionate than he had been in months, constantly telling me how proud he was of my success and how excited he was about our future together. Every compliment felt like a calculated move to keep me unsuspecting until the optimal moment for his betrayal. When he suggested we start seriously discussing children after the Henderson deal closed, I had to excuse myself to the bathroom to avoid showing my revulsion at his manipulation. The most disturbing aspect of Kevin's performance was how convincing it remained even when I knew it was fake. He would hold me close at night, whisper about how much he loved me, and paint elaborate pictures of the life we would build together with the security the Henderson partnership would provide. If I hadn't seen his emails, I would have believed every word. The realization of how thoroughly he had been deceiving me made me question my judgment about everything in our relationship. Lisa Rodriguez had become bolder in her communications with Kevin, apparently confident that their plan was nearing fruition. I continued monitoring their correspondence through the shared iPad, watching them discuss specific plans for their post-divorce life together. Lisa had already started looking at real estate in Portland, where they planned to relocate once Kevin's settlement was finalized. She had even begun researching art studios where she could pursue her creative interests full-time, funded by what they assumed would be my money. Their casual cruelty in discussing my destruction was breathtaking. In one message, Lisa wrote, "I can't wait to see Sarah's face when she realizes what hit her. She's so smug about her business success, thinking she's smarter than everyone else. It'll be satisfying to watch Kevin take half of everything she thinks she built alone." Kevin's response was equally callous. "Sarah has no idea what's coming. She trusts me so completely that she's basically handed me the keys to her financial kingdom. By the time she understands what's happening, it'll be too late to protect anything. These messages reinforced my determination to ensure that Kevin's confidence in his strategy would prove to be catastrophically misplaced. Every cruel comment, every casual reference to stealing my life's work, every discussion of their plans to spend my money, strengthened my resolve to fight back with everything I had. They had underestimated not just my business acumen, but my capacity to protect what I had built when faced with an existential threat. The Henderson contract signing took place at their headquarters in Dallas, a gleaming corporate complex that represented everything my company aspired to become. The ceremony was attended by executives from both companies, lawyers, financial advisors, and industry reporters, who recognized the significance of this partnership. Kevin accompanied me to the event, playing the role of supportive husband while secretly calculating how much this deal would add to his potential divorce settlement. As I signed the documents that would transform EcoClean Solutions into a major player in the sustainable manufacturing industry, Kevin stood behind me with his hand on my shoulder, smiling for the photographers and appearing every inch the proud spouse. The irony was overwhelming. Here was the culmination of nearly a decade of work, the validation of every risk I had taken and every sacrifice I had made, and the person who should have been my greatest supporter was instead planning to use this moment to steal half of my achievement. The partnership with Henderson was structured as a licensing and development agreement rather than an acquisition, which meant I retained full ownership of EcoClean while gaining access to Henderson's manufacturing capabilities and distribution network. This structure had been carefully negotiated to maximize the strategic value of the partnership while protecting my company's independence. What Kevin didn't realize was that this arrangement also made it much more difficult to assign simple community property values to the benefits of the deal. After the signing ceremony, Henderson's executives hosted a celebration dinner at an exclusive Dallas restaurant. Kevin was charming and engaging throughout the evening, making conversation with industry leaders, and demonstrating impressive knowledge about sustainable manufacturing trend. Several Henderson executives complimented me on having such a supportive and informed husband, which made me feel physically sick given what I knew about his true intentions. During the drive back to Austin, Kevin was more effusive in his praise than I had heard him in years. "Sarah, I am so incredibly proud of you," he said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "You've built something amazing, and this partnership is going to take it to levels that most entrepreneurs never achieve. We're going to have the kind of life that people write books about." I managed to smile and thank him for his support, all while knowing that he was mentally calculating how much money this life we're going to have would provide for him and Lisa once he filed for divorce. The Henderson partnership had increased EcoClean's projected valuation to over $90 million, which meant Kevin was anticipating a settlement of at least $45 million if his strategy succeeded. That night, as Kevin slept peacefully beside me, clearly satisfied that his plan was proceeding perfectly, I lay awake thinking about how drastically different our perspectives on recent events had been. While I was celebrating the culmination of years of hard work and strategic planning, Kevin was celebrating what he saw as the successful completion of his setup phase for stealing half of my success. The disconnect was so profound that it felt like we had been living in completely different realities. The next morning brought the call I had been expecting. David Harrison contacted me to report that Robert Sterling had filed divorce papers, and that a process server would likely be delivering them to me within hours. "Are you prepared for this?" David asked. "Once Kevin realizes you've been expecting his move, the situation is going to escalate quickly." I told David the first was ready, though I wasn't sure anyone could truly be prepared for the emotional impact of being formally served with divorce papers by someone they had loved and trust. When the process server arrived at my office that afternoon, Jennifer was with me reviewing quarterly financial reports. She immediately understood what was happening and asked if I wanted her to leave, but I appreciated having her support during such a difficult moment. The divorce petition was exactly as comprehensive and aggressive as Kevin's emails had suggested it would be. Robert Sterling was claiming that Kevin was entitled to half of all assets acquired during our marriage, including my company's increased value, intellectual property developed while we were married, and even future royalties from licensing agreements I had negotiated. The financial demands were staggering, totaling over $50 million in cash and asset. Most infuriatingly, the petition portrayed Kevin as a devoted husband who had provided essential support for my business success, claiming that his marketing expertise and emotional support had been crucial factors in EcoClean's growth. Sterling argued that Kevin deserved compensation for his sweat equity in my company and his role in creating the stable home environment that allowed me to focus on building my business. I called Rachel immediately after reviewing the divorce papers, and she rushed to my office to provide moral support. "The audacity is unbelievable," she said after reading through Kevin's claim. "He's actually trying to take credit for your success while simultaneously betraying you in the most calculating way possible. I hope David Harrison destroys him in court." That evening, I returned home to find Kevin waiting with champagne and flowers, apparently still committed to maintaining his charade of loving husband even after filing for divorce. The cognitive dissonance was surreal. Here was a man who had just initiated legal proceedings to steal half of my life's work, yet he was greeting me with romantic gestures and expressions of affection. "Sarah, we need to talk," Kevin said, his voice carefully modulated to convey sadness rather than the excitement I knew he was feeling. "I've been struggling with some feelings about our marriage, and I think we need to address them honestly." I set my purse down and looked at him direct. "Kevin, I know about everything." The change in his expression was immediate and dramatic. The mask of concerned husband disappeared, replaced by a calculating coldness that I had never seen before. "What do you mean?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already understood exactly what I meant. "I mean, I know about Robert Sterling, about your plan to wait until after the Henderson deal to maximize your settlement, about Lisa Rodriguez, and about every email you've sent planning how to spend my money once you've stolen it." From Kevin's face went through several rapid transformations as he processed the implications of my knowledge. First came surprise, then calculation as he tried to determine how much I knew and when I had discovered it. Finally, his expression settled into something that resembled his true personality more than anything I had seen during our marriage. "How long have you known?" he asked, abandoning any pretense of emotion or reconciliation. "Long enough," I reply. "Long enough to understand exactly who you are and what you've been planning. Long enough to prepare for what you thought would be a surprise attack." Kevin's demeanor shifted completely, transforming from the man I thought I had married into someone I barely recognize. "It doesn't matter what you know, Sarah. Texas is a community property state, and half of everything we acquired during our marriage belongs to me legally. Your precious company, this house, all those investment accounts you thought were yours alone, I'm entitled to half of all of it." The coldness in his voice was chilling, but I was prepared for this conversation. "You might want to have another discussion with Robert Sterling before you get too confident about what you're entitled to." Kevin pulled out his phone and stepped into the next room. I could hear him speaking urgently with someone, presumably his attorney, discussing what my knowledge of their plans might mean for their strategy. When he returned, his expression was troubled but still defiant. "Sterling says it doesn't change anything legally," Kevin said. "Whatever games you think you've been playing, they won't hold up in court. Community property law is clear, and judges don't care about hurt feelings or moral objections to divorce." I smiled for the first time since this conversation began. "Kevin, you've always underestimated me. You thought I was just a naive scientist who got lucky in business. You assumed I would be helpless when faced with your sophisticated legal strategy, but you forgot that I didn't build a 90 million company by being passive or unprepared." The uncertainty in Kevin's eyes was deeply satisfying after months of watching him manipulate me while planning my financial destruction. "What did you do, Sarah?" "I protected what's mine," I said simply. "Every asset, every patent, every business relationship that you thought you could claim has been restructured in ways that accurately reflect my contributions and ownership. Everything we did was completely legal and served legitimate business purposes, but the result is that your $45 million settlement just became a very different number." Kevin's face was flushing with anger as the implications of my words sank. "You can't hide assets before a divorce. That's illegal, and Sterling will expose whatever scheme you've cooked up." "I didn't hide anything," I replied calmly. "I simply made overdue adjustments to corporate structures and ownership arrangements that more accurately reflect reality. David Harrison assures me that everything we did will withstand legal scrutiny because it was all legitimate business decision-making." The mention of David Harrison clearly shook Kevin's confidence further. He recognized the name and understood that I had engaged one of the most formidable divorce attorneys in Texas. "You hired David Harrison?" "When?" "The same day I discovered your emails," I said. "While you thought you were playing a sophisticated game, I was actually staying several moves ahead of you. The difference is that my strategy was designed to protect what I legitimately built, while yours was designed to steal what you never earn." Kevin began pacing around our living room, his mind clearly racing through the implications of what I was telling him. "Lisa was right," he muttered. "She said, you were too smart to be caught off guard like this. I should have moved faster." The casual reference to Lisa and her involvement in planning my destruction sparked the first real anger I had allowed myself to feel during this conversation. "Yes, let's talk about Lisa Rodriguez. I know about every hotel room, every expensive dinner, every piece of jewelry you bought her with my money. I have documentation of every dollar you spent on your affair, all charged to accounts that were funded by my business success." Kevin stopped pacing and stared at me with something approaching respect for the first time in our conversation. "How long have you been watching us?" "Long enough to document everything Sterling will need to explain to a judge when he tries to argue that you deserve $40 million from someone you were actively betraying and stealing from." I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of wine, surprised by how calm I felt now that the pretense was finally over. "You know, Kevin, if you had just asked for a reasonable divorce settlement, I probably would have been generous, but you chose to try to destroy me instead. Kevin followed me into the kitchen, and I could see him trying to shift tactics from aggression to negotiation. Sarah, we can work this out. I admit I handled this badly, but we can reach a fair agreement without going through expensive litigation. Fair? I laugh. You think there's anything fair about what you've done? You've been planning this betrayal for 8 months while pretending to love me. You've been stealing my money to finance an affair while pretending to support my business. You've been documenting my assets and sharing confidential information with your attorney while pretending to be my partner. What part of that seems fair to you? Kevin's attempt at reasonableness was crumbling as he realized that his calculated manipulation had not only failed but had actually strengthened my position for the coming legal battle. What do you want from me, Sarah? Just tell me what it will take to settle this without destroying both of us in court. I studied the man I had once loved, looking for any trace of the person I thought I had married. What I saw instead was someone who had never existed except as a performance designed to gain access to my success and resources. I want you to understand that actions have consequences, Kevin. You chose to see me as a target rather than a partner. You chose to plan my destruction rather than building something together. Now you get to live with the results of those choices. The next morning, Kevin moved out of our house, taking only his personal belongings and the car he had been driving. He left behind the luxury items he had accumulated during our marriage, apparently understanding that those purchases had been made with my money and could be challenged in court. His departure felt like a weight lifting from my shoulders, the end of months of emotional torture disguised as marital intimacy. Lisa Rodriguez called in sick to work that day, apparently too distraught about the collapse of their plan to maintain her professional obligation. According to office gossip that Rachel heard through her network of contacts, Lisa had been expecting to quit her job and move to Portland as soon as Kevin's settlement was finalized. The reality of their situation was apparently hitting both of them harder than they had anticipated. David Harrison called that afternoon to report that Robert Sterling was requesting an immediate meeting to discuss settlement options. Sterling's tone suggests that Kevin is beginning to understand his position isn't as strong as he thought, David said. I suspect they're realizing that the asset protection strategies we implemented are going to make their original demands very difficult to pursue. Over the next week, Sterling made several attempts to negotiate a settlement that would avoid the expense and uncertainty of trial. His initial demands were still unreasonable, asking for $25 million plus ongoing royalties from my patents. But the reduction from his original $50 million claim suggested that Kevin was starting to understand the reality of his situation. David's response to Sterling's settlement offers was uncompromising. My client is prepared to offer a settlement based on actual joint assets acquired during the marriage, minus compensation for funds your client stole to finance his extramarital affair. Beyond that, we see no basis for negotiation. The settlement offer we presented to Kevin was fair but far from the windfall he had expected. He would receive his car, his personal belongings, half the value of our home minus the improvements I had paid for with pre-marriage funds, and his share of the few investment accounts we had genuinely built together. The total value was approximately $2 million, a substantial sum but nowhere near the $45 million he had been planning to claim. Kevin's response to our settlement offer was predictably angry. Sterling filed motions demanding detailed discovery of all business transactions I had conducted since our marriage, claiming that I had illegally transferred assets to avoid community property obligation. He also filed complaints alleging that I had violated fiduciary duties to my spouse by restructuring my business without Kevin's knowledge or consent. The legal battle that followed was intense but shorter than I had anticipated. David and Michelle had documented every aspect of our asset protection strategies so thoroughly that Sterling's challenges were systematically defeated. The business restructuring we had implemented served clear legitimate purposes beyond divorce protection, and the timing of these changes was well documented as predating my knowledge of Kevin's divorce plan. The most satisfying moment came during Kevin's deposition when David methodically exposed the contradictions in his claims about contributing to my business success. Kevin couldn't name a single patent he had helped develop, couldn't describe any specific business strategies he had created, and couldn't explain how his marketing background had contributed to breakthrough innovations in chemical engineering and sustainable manufacture. When David asked Kevin to explain why he deserved $40 million from a business he had played no role in building, Kevin's answer revealed everything about his character. I provided emotional support that allowed Sarah to focus on her work. I created a stable home environment that enabled her success. I deserve compensation for the opportunity costs of supporting her career instead of maximizing my own earning potential. David's follow-up question destroyed Kevin's argument completely. Mitchell Thompson, how do you reconcile your claim about providing emotional support with evidence that you are planning to divorce your wife for financial gain while conducting an extramarital affair funded by her money? Kevin had no answer that could withstand legal scrutiny. The depositions, document discovery, and expert testimony all supported the conclusion that Kevin had contributed nothing substantial to my business success while actively planning to exploit the results of my work for his personal enrich. 3 months after Kevin filed for divorce, we reached a final settlement that was substantially similar to our original offer. Kevin received approximately $2 million in cash and assets, far less than he had spent on legal fees and far less than the lifestyle he had become accustomed to during our marriage. More importantly, he retained no claims on my business, my intellectual property, or my future earning. The personal cost of the divorce battle was significant but manageable. I lost weight, struggled with trust issues, and spent countless hours dealing with legal proceedings instead of focusing on my business. But EcoClean Solutions continued thriving throughout the process, and the Henderson partnership generated even better results than we had projected. The company's success provided perspective on Kevin's betrayal and proof that my achievements were genuinely my own. Lisa Rodriguez was fired from her job when her affair with Kevin became public knowledge, apparently violating her agency's policies about relationships that created conflicts of interest with client account. Last I heard, she was working at a much smaller firm for significantly less money, and her dreams of becoming a full-time artist funded by my settlement money had evaporated along with Kevin's financial prospect. The most unexpected outcome of the divorce was how liberated I felt once the legal proceedings were concluded. Kevin's manipulation and control had been so gradual that I hadn't realized how much of myself I had lost during our marriage. Reclaiming my independence, my decision-making authority, and my confidence felt like returning to a version of myself that I had almost forgotten existed. The weeks following our divorce settlement brought a strange mixture of relief and emptiness that I hadn't anticipated. After months of living in a state of constant vigilance and strategic planning, the sudden absence of threat felt almost disorienting. I would wake up in the morning and for a moment forget that I no longer had to maintain a facade or worry about Kevin monitoring my activity. The freedom was intoxicating, but it also highlighted how much energy I had been spending on defense rather than building the life I truly wanted. EcoClean Solutions flourished in the aftermath of the divorce, almost as if the company itself had been freed from some invisible constraint. The Henderson partnership exceeded every projection we had made, with our sustainable packaging technology being adopted by major brands across multiple industries. Within 6 months of the divorce settlement, our company valuation had increased to over $120 million, making Kevin's $2 million settlement look even more pathetic in retrospect. The irony wasn't lost on me that Kevin's greed had ultimately cost him far more than if he had simply been a genuine partner in our marriage. If he had supported my work authentically and we had grown together as a couple, he would have shared in the benefits of EcoClean's continued success. Instead, his attempt to steal half of my achievements had left him with a fraction of what he might have had through honest partnership. Jennifer and I often discussed how the experience had changed my approach to business relationships and personal boundary. "You're more confident now," she observed during one of our weekly strategy meetings. "Before the divorce, you second-guessed yourself constantly and sought approval for decisions you were perfectly capable of making alone. Now you trust your instincts and move forward with EcoClean from nothing." Kevin's manipulation had gradually eroded my self-perception and decision-making process. Fighting for my company and my future had reminded me of the strength and determination that had built EcoClean from nothing. Kevin's manipulation had gradually eroded my confidence over the years of our marriage, but defending myself against his calculated attack had restored my faith in my own judgment and capabilities. The personal healing process was more complex and gradual than the business recovery. For months after the divorce, I struggled with trust issues that extended far beyond romantic relationship. I found myself questioning the motives of employees, business partners, and even friends, wondering if anyone else in my life might be harboring hidden agendas or seeing me primarily as a source of potential benefit rather than as a human being worthy of genuine connection. Rachel proved invaluable during this period, providing both emotional support and practical reality checks when my suspicions became excessive. "Sarah, not everyone is Kevin," she would remind me when I expressed paranoia about someone's motivation. "Most people are exactly who they appear to be, and you can't let his betrayal prevent you from forming authentic relationships with trustworthy people." Therapy also played a crucial role in processing the emotional aftermath of Kevin's deception. Patricia Hendricks, a psychologist who specialized in helping successful women recover from manipulative relationships, helped me understand how Kevin's gradual erosion of my boundaries and confidence had been a textbook example of psychological manipulation. "Predators like your ex-husband don't choose their targets randomly," Dr. Hendricks explained during one of our sessions. "They specifically seek out successful, generous people who have something they want to explore. Your kindness and trust weren't weaknesses that made you vulnerable. They were qualities that Kevin deliberately targeted because he knew he could abuse them." Understanding the calculated nature of Kevin's manipulation was both painful and liberating. Painful because it meant that virtually every moment of our relationship had been contaminated by his deception, but liberating because it meant that his betrayal reflected his character flaws rather than my failures as a person or partner. 6 months after the divorce, I made a decision that surprised everyone who knew me. I took a 3-month sabbatical from active management of EcoClean to travel and rediscover parts of myself that had been buried during my marriage. Jennifer was initially concerned about my absence during such a crucial growth period, but I convinced her that the company was strong enough to function without my daily oversight and that I needed time to process everything that had happened. The trip began in New Zealand, where I spent weeks hiking through landscapes that reminded me why I had originally been drawn to environmental protection work. Being surrounded by pristine wilderness, far from corporate meetings and legal proceedings, provided perspective on what truly mattered in my life. I realized that somewhere during the years of building my business and maintaining my marriage, I had lost touch with the simple joy of being in nature that had originally inspired my career. From New Zealand, I traveled to Costa Rica, where I volunteered with organizations working to protect rainforest ecosystems through Sustainable Development Project. Working alongside passionate environmentalists who were dedicating their lives to conservation reminded me that business success was only meaningful if it contributed to something larger than personal wealth accumulation. The most transformative part of my journey was a month spent in rural Kenya working with women's cooperatives that were developing sustainable farming techniques and small-scale manufacturing operations. These women were building businesses from nothing, facing obstacles that made my challenges seem trivial. Yet their resilience and determination were inspiring beyond anything I had experienced in corporate boardroom. One evening, sitting around a fire with women who were discussing their dreams for expanding their cooperative soap-making operation, I had a moment of clarity about how I wanted to use my resources and experience. These women had incredible ideas and unlimited potential, but they lacked access to capital, technical expertise, and market connections that I took for granted in my business environment. When I returned to Austin, I was energized by a new sense of purpose that went far beyond growing EcoClean's profits or defending my assets from predatory ex-husband. I wanted to use my success to create opportunities for other women to build sustainable businesses that could transform their communities while protecting the environment. The first step in this new direction was establishing the Martinez Foundation for Women's Environmental Entrepreneurship, a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting female entrepreneurs who were developing environmentally sustainable businesses in underserved communities. The foundation would provide microloans, technical assistance, mentorship, and market access to women whose innovations could create positive environmental and social impact. I committed $50 million of my personal wealth to capitalize the foundation, an amount that would have been impossible if Kevin's divorce strategy had succeeded. The irony was delicious. His attempt to steal my money had ultimately failed so completely that I was now in a position to give away more than he had ever dreamed of claiming. The foundation's first major initiative was a partnership with women's cooperatives in Central America, providing funding and technical support for sustainable manufacturing operations that could produce eco-friendly products for international market. We worked with soap makers, textile producers, and agricultural cooperatives, helping them scale their operations while maintaining environmental and social. The second initiative focused on supporting female entrepreneurs in the United States who were developing innovative environmental technologies but lacked access to traditional venture capital fund. Too many brilliant women with game-changing ideas were being overlooked by male-dominated investment networks that failed to recognize the potential of their innovation. Within a year of its establishment, the Martinez Foundation had supported over 200 women entrepreneurs across 15 countries, creating thousands of jobs while advancing environmental protection goals. The work was incredibly fulfilling, providing a sense of purpose that purely commercial success had never achieved. The foundation's success also opened doors to speaking opportunities and advisory roles that allowed me to share lessons from both my business achievements and my experience surviving Kevin's betrayal. I began accepting invitations to speak at women's business conferences, environmental summits, and entrepreneurship programs, focusing on themes of resilience, strategic thinking, and the importance of protecting one's assets and autonomy. One of the most rewarding speaking engagements was at a conference for women in technology, where I shared the story of how I had protected EcoClean from Kevin's predatory divorce strategy. The audience's response was overwhelming, with dozens of women approaching me afterward to share similar stories of partners, family members, or business associates who had attempted to exploit their success. "I had no idea this was so common," said Elena Vasquez, a software developer whose brother had tried to claim partial ownership of her app development company. "Your story gave me the courage to fight back instead of just accepting his demands to avoid family conflict." These conversations led to the Foundation's third major initiative, educational workshops, focused on asset protection, financial independence, and legal strategies for women entrepreneurs. We partnered with law firms, financial advisors, and business schools to provide practical training that could help women protect themselves from the kind of exploitation I had experienced. The workshops covered topics like prenuptial agreements, corporate structure optimization, intellectual property protection, and recognizing warning signs of financial manipulation and personal relation. We also provided referrals to trusted legal and financial professionals who specialized in protecting high net worth women from predatory partners and family members. Rachel often joked that Kevin had inadvertently become the best thing that ever happened to my career, since his betrayal had ultimately led to the foundation's creation and my emergence as an advocate for women's economic empowerment. He thought he was going to steal your success, she said, but instead he inspired you to achieve something much more meaningful than just building a profitable company. The personal transformation was equally significant. Through therapy, travel, and meaningful work with the foundation, I had rediscovered confidence and authenticity that Kevin's manipulation had gradually eroded. I was no longer seeking approval from others or second-guessing my instincts about people and situation. The experience of successfully defending my life's work had proven that I could trust my own judgment and strategic thinking even in the most challenging circumstance. Dating remained complicated, as it was difficult to know whether potential partners were genuinely interested in me as a person or were primarily attracted to my financial success and public profile. I was much more cautious about sharing details of my wealth or business achievements, preferring to get to know people in contexts where my money and status were less prominent. 2 years after the divorce, I met Doc Marcus Webb at an environmental conference in Vancouver, where we were both speaking about sustainable manufacturing innovations. Marcus was a chemical engineer like myself, working on biodegradable plastics research at the University of British Columbia. Our initial conversations focused entirely on technical and environmental topics with no discussion of business valuations or personal wealth. What impressed me about Marcus was his genuine passion for solving environmental problems through scientific innovation, combined with his complete lack of interest in my financial success or business achievement. He was fascinated by the technical aspects of EcoClean's formulations and eager to discuss potential collaborative research projects, but he never asked about company revenues, my personal net worth, or investment opportunity. Our relationship developed slowly and carefully, with both of us being transparent about past experiences that had made us cautious about new partnership. Marcus had been divorced several years earlier from a wife who had been primarily interested in his academic status and earning potential rather than his actual interests and value. We bonded over shared experiences of learning to recognize authentic connection versus relationships based on ulterior motives. Marcus's reaction when he eventually learned the full scope of my business success and personal wealth was reassuring rather than concern. "I'm happy that you've been successful," he said simply, "but it doesn't change anything about why I'm interested in getting to know you better. Your intelligence and passion for environmental protection were what attracted me initially, and those qualities are much more important than your bank account." The Foundation's work continued expanding with new initiatives supporting women entrepreneurs in renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and environmental remediation technology. We established partnerships with universities, environmental organizations, and development agencies, creating a network that could identify promising female innovators and provide comprehensive support for scaling their solution. One of our most successful graduates was Priya Sharma, an engineer from Mumbai who had developed a revolutionary water purification system using locally available material. Through the Foundation's support, Priya was able to scale her innovation into a social enterprise that now provides clean water access to over 50,000 people while employing hundreds of women in manufacturing and distribution roles. Another success story was Maria Santos, a chemist from São Paulo who had created biodegradable packaging materials from agricultural waste. The Foundation's technical assistance and market connections helped Maria build a company that now supplies major Brazilian retailers while providing income opportunities for rural farming community. These stories reinforced my conviction that the Foundation's work was creating lasting impact far beyond what I could have achieved through purely commercial venture. Each woman we supported became a catalyst for broader change in her community, creating employment opportunities, advancing environmental protection, and inspiring other women to pursue their entrepreneurial dream. The Foundation's success also generated recognition that felt more meaningful than any business awards I had received during EcoClean's growth. Time magazine included me in their list of environmental leaders. The United Nations invited me to speak at their Women's Entrepreneurship Summit, and several universities offered honorary doctorates in recognition of the Foundation's. Most satisfying was a letter I received from Elena Vasquez, the software developer who had attended my first speaking engagement about protecting assets from predatory partners. "Your story saved my company and probably my sanity. My brother's legal challenges failed completely because I had followed your advice about corporate structure and asset protection. More importantly, Your example gave me the courage to prioritize my own goals instead of trying to keep everyone else happy at my own ex. Kevin occasionally appeared in local business news, usually in context that highlighted how far his career had fallen since our divorce. His reputation in Austin's business community had been permanently damaged by the details of his divorce strategy becoming public knowledge. The advertising agency where he had worked quietly terminated his employment, apparently concluding that his behavior created liability issues for client relation. Last I heard, Kevin was working for a much smaller marketing firm in Dallas, earning a fraction of his previous salary and struggling to rebuild his professional credibility. Lisa Rodriguez had moved to Portland as originally planned, but without the financial windfall they had expected. She was working multiple jobs to support. The contrast between their situation and my continued success provided a satisfying sense of justice, though I tried not to dwell on their failures. The best revenge had been building a life that was more fulfilling and impactful than anything I could have achieved if their scheme had succeeded. 5 years after the divorce, Eco Clean Solutions was acquired by a multinational corporation for $800 million, making me one of the wealthiest self-made women in Texas. The acquisition allowed me to step back from daily business operations and focus entirely on the foundation's work while providing resources that enabled us to expand our support for women entrepreneurs globally. Marcus and I were married in a small ceremony attended by family, close friends, and several foundation grant recipients who had become part of our extended community. Our prenuptial agreement was comprehensive and equitable, protecting both of our assets while ensuring that any future business collaborations would be structured fair. More importantly, our relationship was built on genuine mutual respect and shared values rather than financial calculations or strategic positioning. The wedding took place at our home overlooking Lake Austin, the same house where I had discovered Kevin's betrayal and made the decision to fight for my future. Standing on the deck where Kevin had once toasted to our future together while secretly planning my destruction, I exchanged vows with someone who genuinely wanted to build a life together based on love, trust, and shared purpose. During the reception, Rachel gave a toast that perfectly captured the journey from Kevin's betrayal to my current happiness. Sarah, 5 years ago, you were devastated by discovering that someone you loved was trying to steal everything you had built. Tonight, you're surrounded by people who love you for who you are rather than what you have, and you're using your success to create opportunities for women around the world. Kevin thought he was taking your future, but he actually freed you to create something much better. The foundation's impact continued growing with over 1,000 women entrepreneurs supported across 30 countries and hundreds of thousands of jobs created through their business. We had proven that investing in women's environmental entrepreneurship generated returns that went far beyond financial metrics, creating lasting positive change for communities and ecosystems worldwide. Looking back on Kevin's betrayal and the legal battle that followed, I felt grateful rather than bitter about the experience. His attempt to destroy me had ultimately revealed strengths I didn't know I possessed and led to work that was more meaningful than anything I had accomplished during our marriage. The foundation's success had created a legacy that would outlast any individual business achievement and would continue generating positive impact long after I was gone. The most important lesson from surviving Kevin's calculated attack was understanding that true security came not from trying to control other people's behavior, but from building the skills and resources necessary to protect myself when faced with threats. The asset protection strategies David Harrison had helped me implement were just tactical elements of a broader philosophy about maintaining autonomy and self-determination in a world where success often made people targets for exploitation. Women approaching me for advice about protecting themselves from predatory partners or family members always received the same core message: trust your instincts, document everything, surround yourself with competent professionals, and never apologize for success that you have earned through your own efforts. Kevin's betrayal had taught me that the people closest to us could sometimes pose the greatest threats to our security and autonomy, but that awareness could be empowering rather than paralyzing if channeled into appropriate protective measures. The Foundation's educational workshops had now trained over 10,000 women in asset protection and financial independence strategies, potentially preventing countless cases of exploitation and manipulation. Each woman who learned to protect herself became a resource for others in her community, creating ripple effects that extended far beyond our direct program. As I reflected on the journey from Kevin's betrayal to the Foundation's success, I realized that his attempt to steal my achievements had ultimately multiplied their impact exponentially. If he had succeeded in claiming half of my company, I never would have had the resources or motivation to establish the Foundation. His greed had inadvertently created something much more valuable than the money he had tried to steal. The story had become a cautionary tale that I shared regularly with women's business groups and entrepreneurship programs, not to frighten them about the risks of success, but to demonstrate that even the most devastating betrayals could be survived and transformed into sources of strength and purpose. Kevin's calculated manipulation had taught me lessons about resilience, strategic thinking, and the importance of authentic relationships that no business school or consulting firm could have provided. The 10-year anniversary of my divorce from Kevin approached with a significance I hadn't anticipated. A decade had passed since that morning when I discovered his calculated betrayal, and the woman I had become bore little resemblance to the person who had once trusted so completely and questioned herself so frequently. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, but rather through countless small decisions to choose courage over comfort, authenticity over approval, and purpose over profit. EcoClean Solutions had evolved far beyond my original vision during those 10 years. The company that began as a garage experiment in sustainable cleaning products had become a catalyst for industry-wide changes in environmental responsibility. Our innovations in biodegradable packaging and non-toxic manufacturing processes were now standard practices across multiple sectors, proving that profitability and environmental protection weren't mutually exclusive goals. The acquisition by Henderson Industries had been structured as a merger rather than a simple purchase, allowing me to maintain significant influence over the company's direction, while providing resources for global expansion. Under this arrangement, EcoClean sustainable technologies were being implemented in manufacturing facilities across 6 continents, reducing chemical pollution and waste production on a scale I had never imagined possible. More satisfying than the business success was the knowledge that Kevin's betrayal had inadvertently contributed to these achievements. His attempt to steal half of my company had forced me to develop strategic thinking and protective measures that ultimately made EcoClean stronger and more resilient. The asset protection strategies we had implemented during the divorce proceedings had evolved into sophisticated corporate governance structures that attracted investors and partners who valued long-term sustainability over short-term profit. The Martinez Foundation had grown into one of the most influential organizations supporting women's environmental entrepreneurship worldwide. Our programs now operated in over 50 countries, having supported more than 5,000 women entrepreneurs whose businesses had created nearly 200,000 jobs while advancing environmental protection goals in their community. The Foundation's impact extended far beyond direct grant recipients through our educational initiatives and policy advocacy work. We had successfully lobbied for changes in international trade agreements that provided preferential treatment for women-owned sustainable business, created scholarship programs that enabled women from developing countries to study environmental engineering at leading universities, and established a network of mentorship relationships that connected successful female entrepreneurs with emerging innovators. One of our most successful graduates, Dr. Amara Okafor from Nigeria, had developed revolutionary solar panel technology using locally sourced materials that were both more efficient and more affordable than traditional photovoltaic systems. Through the Foundation's support, Amara had built a company that now manufactured solar panels for rural electrification projects across sub-Saharan Africa, providing clean energy access to over 2 million people while employing thousands of women in manufacturing and installation roles. Another remarkable success story was Chen Wei Ming from Taiwan, who had created a breakthrough in ocean plastic remediation technology. And Chen's innovation used specially designed microorganisms to break down plastic waste into harmless organic compounds, offering a potential solution to one of the world's most pressing environmental challenges. The Foundation's technical assistance and investment connections had helped Chen scale her laboratory discovery into a commercial operation that was now being deployed in coastal communities throughout Southeast Asia. These stories reinforced my conviction that supporting women's entrepreneurship generated multiplier effects that extended far beyond individual business success. Each woman we supported became a catalyst for broader change in her community, creating employment opportunities, advancing environmental protection, and inspiring other women to pursue their innovative ideas. The Foundation's investment in women's entrepreneurship was simultaneously addressing gender inequality, environmental degradation, and economic development challenges in ways that traditional aid programs had never achieved. The Foundation's success had also created opportunities for me to influence policy discussions at the highest levels of international governance. I served on advisory committees for the United Nations Environment Program, the World Bank's Sustainable Development Initiatives, and several bilateral trade commissions focused on promoting environmentally responsible business practice. These roles allowed me to advocate for policies that would create enabling environments for women's environmental entrepreneurship on a global scale. My relationship with Marcus had deepened into a partnership that exemplified everything my marriage to Kevin had lacked. Marcus brought his own expertise in biodegradable materials research to our collaborative projects, while maintaining complete independence in his academic career and personal interest. We had developed several breakthrough innovations together, including a new class of compostable packaging materials that were now being used by major food manufacturers worldwide. The contrast between my relationship with Marcus and my former marriage to Kevin was stark and instructive. Marcus celebrated my achievements without trying to claim credit for them, supported my ambitious projects without attempting to control them, and maintained his own professional identity without feeling threatened by my success. Our financial arrangements were transparent and equitable, with prenuptial agreements that protected both of our assets while ensuring that any collaborative innovations would be fairly attributed and compensate. More importantly, Marcus's presence in my life provided emotional security without compromising my autonomy. I never felt the need to seek his approval for business decisions or modify my behavior to avoid threatening his ego. The relationship enhanced my life without constraining it, proving that genuine partnership was possible between equals who respected each other's independence and ambition. Our joint research projects had produced several major innovations in sustainable materials science, including biodegradable alternatives to conventional plastics that maintain durability while breaking down completely in natural environment. These developments had attracted significant investment from major corporations, seeking to reduce their environmental footprints, generating licensing revenues that we donated to Environmental Protection Organization Research Institute. The 10th anniversary of my divorce coincided with another significant milestone, the Foundation's announcement of its largest initiative to date, a $1 billion commitment to supporting women's climate solutions worldwide. This Global Women's Climate Innovation Fund would provide comprehensive support for female entrepreneurs developing technologies to address climate change, from renewable energy systems to carbon capture innovations, to sustainable agriculture practices. The fund's announcement generated international media attention that reflected how dramatically my public profile had evolved since the divorce. Instead of being known primarily as a successful businesswoman who had survived a contentious divorce, I was now recognized as a global leader in environmental innovation and women's economic empowerment. The transformation from victim to advocate to influential policymaker had taken a decade to complete, but the journey had been deeply fulfilling. Speaking at the fund's launch event in Geneva, I reflected on how Kevin's betrayal had inadvertently set in motion the chain of events that led to this moment. 10 years ago, someone I trusted tried to steal half of everything I had built. I told the audience of international development leaders, environmental ministers, and women entrepreneurs from around the world. His attempt failed, but it taught me lessons about resilience, strategic thinking, and the importance of using success to create opportunities for others that I never could have learned any other way. The audience's response was overwhelmingly positive, with many women approaching me afterward to share similar stories of overcoming betrayal and exploitation. These conversations reinforced my understanding that Kevin's behavior had been part of a broader pattern of men. A renewable energy researcher from Jordan, whose business partner had attempted to steal her solar technology patents, just as their company was gaining international recognition. "Your story gave me the courage to fight back instead of accepting his claims," Fatima told me. "I used the same asset protection strategies you described in your speeches, and I was able to keep control of my innovation. Now my company is providing clean energy to refugee camps throughout the Middle East." These interactions highlighted the ripple effects of sharing my experience publicly. Each woman who learned to protect herself from exploitation became a resource for others in her network, creating cascading effects that extended far beyond my direct influence. The Foundation's educational programs had formalized this peer-to-peer learning approach, training women to become advocates and advisors for other entrepreneurs in their communities. The Global Women's Climate Innovation Fund's first year exceeded all expectations, supporting over 300 women entrepreneurs whose innovations were addressing various aspects of climate change. The diversity of solutions was remarkable, ranging from Dr. Kiko Tanaka's breakthrough in efficient desalination technology to Maria Gonzalez's development of drought-resistant crop varieties to Dr. Priya Kapoor's innovation in methane capture systems for agricultural operation. Each project funded through the initiative demonstrated the unique perspectives and approaches that women brought to solving complex environmental challenges. Research consistently showed that women entrepreneurs were more likely than their male counterparts to prioritize sustainability, community impact, and long-term environmental benefits over short-term profit maximization. Supporting women's climate innovations was therefore not just a matter of gender equity, but a strategic approach to developing more effective and sustainable solutions to environmental challenge. The fund's success attracted additional commitments from governments, corporations, and philanthropic organizations, growing the initiative to over $2 billion in committed funding within 18 months of its launch. This expansion enabled us to support larger-scale projects and provide more comprehensive assistance to entrepreneurs who were developing transformative technologies. One of the fund's most ambitious projects was supporting Dr. Ayesha Patel's development of revolutionary carbon capture technology that could be integrated into existing industrial facilities at a fraction of the cost of traditional carbon sequestration system. Ayesha's innovation had the potential to dramatically reduce industrial carbon emissions while creating valuable byproducts that could be sold to offset implementation costs. The Foundation's investment in Ayesha's research included not only financial support, but also connections to potential manufacturing partners, regulatory experts who could navigate approval processes, and marketing professionals who specialized in environmental technology commercialization. This comprehensive support model had proven much more effective than traditional grant programs that provided funding without addressing the broader challenges entrepreneurs faced in scaling their innovation. The personal fulfillment I derived from the Foundation's work far exceeded any satisfaction I had experienced from purely commercial success. While building eco-clean solutions had been professionally rewarding, supporting other women's entrepreneurial journeys provided a sense of purpose that transcended individual achievement. Each success story from our grant recipients felt like validation that Kevin's betrayal had ultimately contributed to something much more meaningful than personal wealth accumulation. The Foundation's educational initiatives had also evolved into comprehensive programs that addressed not only asset protection and business development, but also leadership skills, negotiation strategies, and confidence building. We had documented that many successful women struggled with imposter syndrome and self-doubt that limited their willingness to pursue ambitious goals or assert their value in business relationships. Our leadership development workshops specifically address these psychological barriers, providing practical tools for recognizing and countering manipulation tactics, setting appropriate boundaries in professional relationships, and maintaining confidence when facing criticism or skepticism. The program's effectiveness was demonstrated through longitudinal studies showing that participants increased their business revenues, leadership roles, and advocacy activities significantly more than control groups who received only technical training. The Foundation's research initiatives had also generated valuable insights about the factors that enabled or constrained women's entrepreneurship in different cultural and economic contexts. This research informed policy recommendations that we shared with governments and international development organizations, advocating for legal reforms, infrastructure investments, and cultural changes that would create more supportive environments for women's business development. One particularly impactful research finding was that women entrepreneurs were much more likely to succeed when they had access to female mentors who had overcome similar challenges. This insight led to the creation of our Global Women's Entrepreneurship Network, which connected successful women business leaders with emerging entrepreneurs across industries and continent. The network now included over 10,000 members who provided mentorship, investment, opportunities, and collaborative partnerships for women-led businesses worldwide. My role as a mentor within this network had become one of the most personally rewarding aspects of my work. Sharing lessons from both my business success and my experience, surviving Kevin's betrayal helped other women navigate similar challenges while building stronger and more resilient enterprises. Many of these mentoring relationships had evolved into lasting friendships and ongoing collaborative partnerships. One of my most successful mentees was Doc Isabella Rodriguez, a biotechnology researcher from Mexico who had developed innovative approaches to using engineered algae for environmental remediation and biofuel production. Isabella's initial research was brilliant, but she lacked the business experience and industry connections necessary to commercialize her discoveries effectively. Through our mentoring relationship, I helped Isabella develop a comprehensive business strategy, connect with potential investors and manufacturing partners, and navigate the complex regulatory landscape for biotechnology innovation. Isabella's company was now operating commercial-scale algae production facilities in 3 countries, providing sustainable alternatives to fossil fuels while remediating contaminated water sources. Isabella's success exemplified the multiplier effect that effective mentorship could create. She had used the Foundation's support to build not just a successful business but a platform for training other women in biotechnology entrepreneurship. Her company's internship and apprenticeship programs had become pathways for women from underrepresented communities to enter the biotechnology industry, creating opportunities that extended far beyond her initial innovation. The network effect of supporting women's entrepreneurship had proven to be one of the Foundation's most powerful mechanisms for creating lasting change. Each successful entrepreneur became a resource for others in her community, providing informal mentorship, investment opportunities, and collaborative partnerships that multiplied the impact of our initial investment. This organic growth in women's entrepreneurship networks was particularly evident in regions where the Foundation had been operating for several years. In Kenya, for example, our early grant recipients had formed a cooperative association that provided technical assistance, shared marketing resources, and collective purchasing power for emerging women entrepreneurs. This peer-to-peer support network was now more effective at supporting new businesses than many traditional development programs. The Foundation's success had also created opportunities for me to influence corporate practices beyond environmental sustainability. Many major corporations had begun implementing supplier diversity programs that prioritized purchasing from women-owned businesses, recognizing that these partnerships often generated better social and environmental outcomes than traditional procurement approach. I served on advisory boards for several Fortune 500 companies, helping them develop sourcing strategies that supported women entrepreneurs while meeting their operational need. These collaborations demonstrated that supporting women's entrepreneurship was not just socially responsible but often economically advantageous, as women-led businesses consistently demonstrated higher levels of innovation, customer satisfaction, and long-term sustainability. The personal transformation that had resulted from surviving Kevin's betrayal continued evolving throughout the decade following our divorce. The experience had taught me that true security came not from trying to control other people's behavior, but from developing the skills, resources, and support networks necessary to protect myself and pursue my goals regardless of external threats or challenge. This understanding had influenced every aspect of my life, from business decisions to personal relationships to philanthropic strategies. I no longer sought approval from others or modified my behavior to avoid potential conflict. Instead, I focused on building authentic relationships with people who shared my values and supported my goals while maintaining appropriate boundaries with those who might see me primarily as a source of potential benefit. The confidence and strategic thinking skills I had developed during the divorce proceedings had proven invaluable in subsequent business negotiations, policy discussions, and international collaboration. The experience of successfully defending my life's work against a calculated attack had demonstrated that I could trust my own judgment and capabilities even in the most challenging circumstance. Marcus often observed that my experience with Kevin had made me a more effective leader and advocate because it had eliminated any tendency towards self-doubt or people-pleasing that might have constrained my effectiveness. "You know who you are and what you stand for," he said, "and that clarity makes it much easier for others to trust your judgment and follow your leadership." The Foundation's work had also provided opportunities to address the broader cultural and structural factors that enabled financial exploitation of successful women. Through our policy advocacy initiative, we had successfully lobbied for legal reforms in several countries that strengthened asset protection rights for entrepreneurs, improved enforcement of intellectual property protections, and created legal consequences for predatory behavior in business relationships. These policy changes were creating safer environments for women's entrepreneurship while raising awareness about the prevalence of financial exploitation targeting successful women. Educational campaigns funded by the Foundation had reached millions of women worldwide, providing information about recognizing warning signs of predatory relationships and implementing protective measures before problems develop. The cumulative impact of these various initiatives was beginning to create measurable changes in women's economic participation and environmental innovation worldwide. Countries where the Foundation had been operating for several years showed significant increases in women's business ownership rates, environmental technology patents filed by women, and female representation in environmental policy leadership roles. As I reflected on the decade since Kevin's betrayal, I felt profound gratitude for the journey that had led to this point. His attempt to destroy my life had ultimately revealed strength I didn't know I possessed and led to work that was more meaningful than anything I could have imagined during our marriage. The Foundation's success had created a legacy that would continue generating positive impact long after my individual contributions were forgot. The most important lesson from surviving Kevin's calculated attack was understanding that betrayal and adversity could become sources of strength and purpose if approached with courage and strategic thinking. The experience had taught me that true empowerment came from using personal challenges as catalysts for broader positive change, transforming individual suffering into collective benefit. Looking toward the future, I was excited about the Foundation's expanding impact and the growing network of women entrepreneurs who are addressing the world's most pressing environmental challenge. Each new success story reinforced my conviction that supporting women's leadership was not just morally imperative, but strategically essential for creating a more sustainable and equitable world. The Global Women's Climate Innovation Fund was already planning its second phase, which would focus on supporting women entrepreneurs developing adaptation technologies for communities most vulnerable to climate change impact. This initiative would combine the Foundation's expertise in entrepreneurship support with cutting-edge research on climate resilience, creating solutions that were both environmentally effective and economically sustainable. Kevin's betrayal had taught me that the people closest to us could sometimes pose the greatest threats to our security and success, but that awareness could be empowering rather than paralyzing, if channeled into appropriate protective measures and meaningful work. The Foundation's success demonstrated that even the most devastating personal challenges could be transformed into opportunities for creating lasting positive change in the world. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them.